What's up guys, Tails86 here with Wii-kly Review, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of our History of Nintendo video, and today we're going to be talking about two other systems from Nintendo's franchise. Now, the two we're going to be talking about are the ones right after the Super Nintendo came out. Those consoles, are the Nintendo 64 and the Nintendo Gamecube. So, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the N64. Now this one is one of my favorites to remember because it was actually one of my game systems that I finally went ahead and got into after I went ahead and gave up on Super Nintendo. Apparently I was not, as I said before tons of times, I was not able to own a Super Nintendo in my younger years. I went with the Sega Genesis. And then I went ahead and changed my mind, going back to Nintendo once again, trying to give them another chance. Even though I knew I failed the first time when I went for Sega, and I decided to get me a Nintendo 64. Now, the Nintendo 64 came out on September 29th, 1996 for North America. Now, it came out with really cool games, but the thing that was a problem with me, as well as I think a lot of other gamers, that they just didn't like as much, was the controllers. The controllers were very bulky, and plus they had this weird analog stick that I had to use for every single game. Now, the thing that was really bad about these controllers was that analog stick. Almost every game that came out for the N64 used this control stick. And sometimes they would make it so the game would have to make you twist the control stick a whole bunch. And if it broke, you were out of luck, because these things costed a pretty good amount of money. Now, they did come out though with some really good games, such as one of the games that they came out with, which was the Mario series games, was games like Mario 64, which was actually one of the greatest Mario games, in my opinion, that was ever brought to 3D. And then one of my favorite fighting games for the Nintendo 64, which would be Super Smash Brothers. Now, of course, it wasn't the greatest fighting game ever made, but it was one that a lot of Nintendo fans remember as being a revolutionary game that Nintendo brought, in collaboration, of course, with Hall Entertainment. Of course, not forgetting some of Rare's greatest achievements, like the famous platformer Banjo-Kazooie, which, of course, we have many other installments like Banjo-Tooie and the original Banjo-Kazooie. To even using some really cool first-person shooter games from Rare as well. Of course, not being anywhere near as good as GoldenEye or any other first-person shooters, but we did have Perfect Dark, which was also, like I said, another fantastic little treasure type game from Rare, which would be one game that everyone would remember later on coming to the Xbox. Of course, they sure did give you a lot of ammo. But the thing that was most satisfying about the game was being able to shoot your enemies. And watching them die. Of course, not also forgetting some puzzle games that was also pretty famous, like the Pokemon Puzzle League games. Which also were pretty fascinating at the time, because we didn't really have too many puzzle games. Of course, we did have Tetris on like the Super Nintendo and much earlier systems, but still, it was something pretty revolutionary. And then, of course, adding some even cooler abilities, as well as playing shumps. One genre that wasn't really seen too much on a lot of systems, but one that I mostly remember. especially one that's really fast, which was the Star Soldier series. Of course, not many Star Soldier games were made for the Nintendo. You had lots of them, but not anywhere near as many. They were more on the TurboGrafx 16, which was also another great system. As time slowly went by, the Nintendo 64 slowly started to diminish, and Nintendo unveiled its newest console. Now this one, in my opinion, guys, is one of my absolute favorite Nintendo consoles other than Super Nintendo. And this console was known as the Nintendo Gamecube. Now what was so special about this system is it was the second system to support online play for a Nintendo system. The first one being the Nintendo 64 DD, which was unfortunately not released in America. One of the things that was so cool about the N64 though, compared to, the GameCube, was it used mini DVD optical discs. But plus it was so compact, you could take it anywhere and it would look like a lunchbox. That's why a lot of people referred to it as the lunchbox system. But one of the things that was so awesome about this system was there was a lot in the system that you could use for it, especially for only paying $100 for the system, which was amazing because I mean, you think about it, you're paying about I think it was about $150 when it first came out. But the thing that was so awesome about the system was this right here. Nintendo figured it out, finally, how to make a great control. The Nintendo GameCube controller. Now, this time, they did it right. Thankfully, after they went ahead and understood their mistakes that they made with the N64 controller, they took, I can see, a lot more time to think about the player, but also made it so the buttons were not so jammed together. And this makes it a little bit easier. You have a D-pad down here, you have an analog stick up here, which not all game systems used the analog stick, but most did. Now, instead of having the controls, the C buttons, you had a C stick as well. So it kind of gave it basically something that was revolutionary that Nintendo ever did. But you also had very big buttons, very responsive buttons, and it was also one of the most easy controllers to buy. Of course, around now you can buy them for really, really cheap, about $20 brand new. And they still make them, so if you have a GameCube, definitely take a look at getting one of these. But this was one of my favorite systems that Nintendo ever made, because it also used, of course, memory cards, just like the N64 did. But it was also, like I said, the second online-based game system. And what I mean by that is, on the very back of it, you had different types of ports that you could hook this up with. Like you had a high-speed port, you had two serial ports, which you could pull right straight out, and be able to plug in a serial port. Now also, you could plug in a online cable and actually play your GameCube games online, which was something really awesome. Now sadly though, this game system did not support as many titles for online play. I believe a couple of them were Kirby's Air Rider and a couple other ones that I can't remember right offhand. But it was something revolutionary. Another add-on that they chose for it was two other add-ons. It was able to use the Game Boy Advance controller as a controller. So that was also something else pretty cool. You would just hook it up with a Game Boy link cable and be able to use your Game Boy to play your games. Now, of course, you could also use the Game Boy player, which is also a pretty hard thing to find nowadays. But if you do find one, you can play your old Game Boy games on it onto the big screen, instead of you having to buy any special kind of hookups or anything like that and having to strain your eyes. But it was something, like I said, it was very revolutionary, but this also was one of the most indestructible game systems I've ever seen. I've literally seen a person take a sledgehammer to this thing and whack it like 10 times and the sucker will still work, which is something amazing. So you can definitely tell Nintendo took a lot of time to fix their mistakes that they made with the Nintendo 64. But anyway, enough about me yapping. Let's go ahead and take a look at some games that were on the Nintendo 64 that made the system so popular. Now there were many different types of Nintendo game consoles that had tons of Mario titles. Super Mario Sunshine was another jump into the Gamecube that was also something revolutionary as well, because it used a better camera system, even better than the N64, since you were able to use the control stick, the C-stick as I should call it, to be able to control your character and move him around. So it was something pretty revolutionary, as well as being able to float in midair using FLUDD. Now of course there were other titles on the GameCube, like Luigi's Mansion, one very underrated game that almost any GameCuber or any fan of Nintendo who is definitely a fan also of Luigi should own. It was a simple game, but also one that had a simple task. Suck up ghosts and earn some cash doing it. But then again, everybody just loved Luigi. Even going to this extreme of Sonic games, showing off Sonic Gems on the GameCube as well. Showing off all the different types of Sonic games that were made back then, including some that were never released from Sega, except for on the Sega CD, as well as other platforms. Sonic CD being one of my absolute favorite Sonic titles, or at least from this genre. Of course, not forgetting also timeless classics like the Mario Kart series, finally going to the GameCube with Mario Kart Double Dash, which made it a little bit easier for people who did not know anything real good about drifting. And it made the game simple, but it was still fun. But also being able to switch between players that you were currently using. And guys, we could go on and on about the Nintendo GameCube and the N64 being both great and okay systems, but the main focus is that we're focusing on just the history of Nintendo only. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of my history of Nintendo walkthrough with the Nintendo 64 and the Nintendo GameCube. Sorry the video was a little bit longer. I kind of wanted to show off a couple games that were from previous genres and stuff from previous games. But anyway, I hope you guys liked it. Please feel free to leave comments, subscribe, and take care, guys. This has been Wii-kly Review. Later.